Now, you guys remember this story, the story that the Russians were paying Talibanis to kill us? Well, it was reported like this.
In our Worldly Today, President Trump dismissing the Russian bounty intelligence story as a hoax meant to damage him and Republicans. The president often touts his relationship with his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin.
The White House also responding tonight to a bombshell report accusing Russia of offering bounties to the Taliban to kill American soldiers in Afghanistan.
Bombshell.
And now you know from this reporting in the New York Times, which has since been confirmed by the Wall Street Journal, that not only does the president...
It's confirmed! It's now been confirmed by some other jagoffs who lie to you on the regular.
...know that Russia was paying for American soldiers' deaths.
News. Get this. The Washington Post is now reporting that the alleged Russian bounties to Taliban fighters in Afghanistan are believed to have resulted in the deaths of U.S. troops.
Like this New York Times story about a stunning U.S. intel assessment, finding that Russia secretly offered Afghan militants bounties to kill U.S. troops.
So comes under fire over those bombshell reports that the White House was told Russia was paying bounties to kill U.S. troops in Afghanistan.
The most important application of that question is, what did the president know about Vladimir Putin offering a bounty for the killing of American soldiers in Afghanistan, and when did he know it?
A senior Afghan official confirmed to CBS News that the reports were not only true, but the Russian government achieved some success with their plans.
Barry Cayley, I cannot tell a lie McEnany, insists the president does in fact read everything he needs to read. We need to look at the real threat to U.S. troops and the risk that Russia was putting a bounty on their heads.
That Americans found out this weekend that Vladimir Putin is paying to put bounties on the heads of American troops.
Telling CNN that the White House was warned about Russia offering bounties, actual bounties to kill U.S. troops in Afghanistan.
He's not even there yet. He's still suggesting that the reporting about the fact that there were these bounties offered is fake. Meanwhile, your organization, the New York Times and others, are getting some fairly detailed reporting about how it actually works.
Despite those denials over and over, sources tell CNN that last week the U.S. even shared that intelligence with British officials, as some of the British troops would have been targeted as well.
Yeah, to say nothing of putting bounties on American troops.
It's unbelievable, Joy.
Yeah.
Public reporting.
You know why it's unbelievable? Because it didn't happen. And guess what? We were able to debunk it in real time here in the Jimmy Dore studios with Aaron Mate and Ron Placone and Steph Zamorano. No trouble whatsoever. We were able to debunk it in real time. But Rachel Maddow, fake tough guy Lawrence O'Donnell, everybody at CNN, everybody at CBS, CNBC, none of them could get it right. Isn't that amazing? In fact, because now, how do we know? This is from the Daily Beast. U.S. intel walks back the claim that Russians put bounties on American troops. And it says, turn around. They walked it back, and then they tripped over it a few hundred times. What the? Are you? That's what they did. So I think, Aaron, I can hear myself coming through your computer. Can you put on earphones?
My bad.
No problem. But that is.
This is ridiculous. This is Fancy Vagina Friday.
Fancy Vagina Friday, and we got this fucking yin yang. Fucking, this is the kind of shit that happens at TYT.
Fucking push back, Jimmy.
They don't. I'm pushing back on him.
I think I blame his different location.
I do.
Going to all these locations.
It's like he's pissing on your leg, Ron.
Right. Hey, if I was frickin' Tucker Carlson, your butt buddy.
How are we doing?
You'd probably be at your studio.
Okay, I lost sound for a second, so if you're making fun of me, I just missed it.
No, we weren't.
We were talking about your traction. Anyway, so now I can't hear myself. That's good. This is working, right? Okay, good.
Yeah, my bad.
So this is the Daily Beast. So now they're saying that the CIA is telling them that was a fake story. They reported, well, we're going to get to that. This is the White House. This is from the BBC. The White House has acknowledged there was little evidence that Russia had offered Taliban militants bounties to kill U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan. I don't know if, did you hear that video that I just played? Did you hear everyone reporting it as fact? It's outrageous, unbelievable. Actual bounties, they said on CNN.
Can I mention how great it was in that video? How Rachel Maddow was right before Wolf Blitzer, because it's like she sounded like she was waiting all day to say that sentence. Like she was just so excited to say that sentence. And then she was followed by Wolf Blitzer, who sounded like someone just woke him up and he started reading a teleprompter. That's how he always sounds. He's not like, wake up, Wolf. He's like, is that the thing right there? Okay, I'm reading. Like that's how he always sounds.
That very, very astute observations. Russia has denied paying the bounties. In last year's U.S. election, Joe Biden heavily criticized Donald Trump for not confronting Russia over this claim. But that was then, and this is now, so... The intelligence assessment was first reported last June by the New York Times and was cited by Mr. Biden on the 2020 presidential campaign trail to accuse then-President Trump of not standing up to Russia. Out of the 5 million things to criticize Trump for, that's what he picked, folks. That's what the Democrats and Joe Biden and Rachel Maddow and Cenk Uygur, that's what they decided to go after Trump for. Bullshit made-up claim by the CIA. Trump's so horrible, we have to make stuff up about him. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki now tells reporters the intelligence community had determined the claim had low to moderate confidence. Wow. Low to moderate confidence. Wow. President Trump, at the time, called it fake news and a fake issue. He later tweeted that he was not briefed on the subject because U.S. intelligence agents had not deemed it credible. And in 2020, Joe Biden repeatedly used the report to criticize Trump's leadership. His entire presidency has been a gift to Putin, but this is beyond the pale, said Joe Biden of his Republican opponent after the story broke. It's a betrayal of every single American family with a loved one serving in Afghanistan or anywhere else. That's what Joe Biden said about this made-up story. Somehow Joe Biden managed to attack Donald Trump, a dude who picked Mike Pence as his vice president, and somehow Joe Biden still attacks him from the right. That's amazing. That is amazing. Here we go. Here's the Daily Beast. Former U.S. diplomats and intelligence officers viewed the Bounties account skeptically. One retired diplomat suspected someone leaked this to slow down the troop withdrawal. So that's exactly what we said at the time when we covered it. We said that they're doing this because Trump wants to pull troops out of Afghanistan and the military-industrial complex, and the media doesn't want that to happen, so they pushed this false story. And here's how I reported it. Weird how the Daily Beast spread this false conspiracy theory for 2 years straight while pothead YouTube hosts were debunking it in real time. Good thing the CIA told them it was fake, or else they would never know. And here's the Daily Beast covering it. Russia offered Afghan militants bounties for killing U.S. soldiers. Russia bounties for killing Americans go back 5 years. That's the kind of bullshit claims they were making. And this story got confirmed. Who did it get confirmed by? John Hudson. He said, I covered diplomacy and national security for the Washington Post. You want to see what he did? He said, we have confirmed the New York Times scoop. A Russian military spy unit offered bounties to Taliban-linked militants to attack coalition forces in Afghanistan. He said they confirmed it. What that's called is a lie. John Hudson isn't making a mistake. He's straight up lying, pushing propaganda for more war. And that's what they do at the New York Times and the Washington Post. Because as I pointed out in real time, unlike Rachel Maddow, fake tough guy Lawrence O'Donnell, and Cenk Uygur, in real time, I pointed out he's lying. He did not confirm anything. This is directly from that article. The attempt to stoke violence against Americans, if confirmed. That was in his own Washington Post story, which he said confirmed it. It didn't confirm anything. John Hudson's a fucking liar, and I'm a better journalist than he is, and I'm high. This is how U.S. corporations manufacture consent through their propaganda arm known as the news media. Let's bring in Aaron Matei. Aaron, would you like to comment on this story that is now proving you correct again? Let's remember, Aaron was the lone voice in mainstream media who was debunking this, besides, I guess, Glenn Greenwald and Matt Taibbi. And you won an award for it. You got the I.F. Stone Award for your meticulous debunking of Russiagate, and you debunked this on our show. So go ahead. What would you like to say? Would you like to take a victory lap?
Well, I just confirmed something, actually, with my reporting. I confirmed that John Hudson still has not deleted that tweet somehow. How is that tweet still up that he says I've confirmed the story? So I've confirmed just now on Twitter that he has still not deleted that, which speaks to this culture we have in media where no matter how many times they get humiliated, there's never any accountability, remote accountability. And I was thinking as you were playing that clip reel of all those people like Maddow and Wolf Blitzer breathlessly parroting the Russian bounty story, I was hit with a sense of fatigue. And I'm actually not tired of doing the debunking because when we do it, it's actually funny and it's fun. Like we have a good time doing it, and we've been doing it together for, I don't know, over 2 years now. Every time there was a Russia-related bombshell, I'd write an article, I'd come on your show, and we do the easy debunking because it's all the facts are actually right there. It's just all these people who call themselves journalists are ignoring the actual facts and taking the pronouncements of the CIA as gospel. So I was fatigued, not for us, but for the people having to parrot this stuff and day after day put on their business attire, go into their studios, and humiliate themselves constantly, because everyone has to have a conscience at some point and an actual truth center somewhere in that, a corrupt brain of theirs. And there's got to be at some level some kind of like agony, like, how do I keep doing this? I realize they're totally cut off from it in their minds, but somewhere deep down emotionally that has to resonate. So it's like, how often do you how many times can you get humiliated before it starts to sink in? But the answer is never. It never sinks in. They'll go on to the next Russia thing and they'll breathlessly parrot that too. And look, this was so obvious at the time. You were pointing out the motives, that this was timed right after Trump had announced his intention to withdraw U.S. troops from Afghanistan by the end of the year. The Pentagon, the CIA were very much against that. So were people inside the Afghan government. So it was very obvious what was going on. The New York Times, they devoted an insane amount of resources to the story because this was their story first. And Gareth Porter, a veteran reporter, did a great story for The Gray Zone in early July. And he pointed out that the New York Times commissioned squads of reporters comprising 9 different correspondents to write 8 articles hyping the bounty story in 8 days. So Jesus 9 correspondents, Christ. 8 articles in 8 days, because they were so all in on this story, because they were so determined to promote the CIA's propaganda. And meanwhile, it was obvious what was happening. The actual so-called intelligence was coming from captured prisoners in Afghanistan and who were being interrogated by the NDS, the Internal Afghan Intelligence Service, which had a concerted motive to keep U.S. troops in Afghanistan, because once U.S. troops leave, they're in trouble because the Taliban is stronger. And so they picked the perfect narrative to align with the national security state and Democratic dupes like everyone who hosts a show on MSNBC, which is that Russia is doing something here. And it worked to a T because they planted this lie. It got parroted by the CIA and every single mainstream media outlet. And everyone became convinced that we could not withdraw from Afghanistan because that would reward our mortal enemy, Vladimir Putin, who was out there trying to kill our troops. And even though all the evidence was coming out showing this and showing that even U.S. intelligence officials had no confidence in the story, this actually isn't some new revelation now.
No.
That because like the only difference now is that the Biden administration has admitted what U.S. intelligence officials, aside from the CIA, were saying back in July. The problem is MSNBC refused to acknowledge really the dissenting intelligence. And even when the Pentagon said we have no evidence for this in early September, MSNBC just didn't report it. It just wasn't reported. So this is a case of some U.S. journalists being even more militarist than the Pentagon. And that's what leads to this embarrassment today. When finally, because now it serves Biden because he's supposedly trying to withdraw from Afghanistan, although there's always a catch to that. Now we have Biden admitting that the story is bunk too, and so now they have to admit it too, because it's just, or now at least no one will try to defend it because it's just so empty.
And as we reported just the other day, Joe Biden is rehiring Donald Trump's handpicked ambassador to Russia.
Yeah.
So Donald Trump hired a guy to be his own ambassador to Russia. Joe Biden rehiring that guy. So I think we all know Russiagate was completely made up. The idea that Trump was compromised by Putin and Russia, completely made up. And we knew it here from day one. And exactly what Aaron Mate said just now, it wasn't hard to debunk this. So the people who didn't want to debunk, and by the way, if they got this story wrong in good faith, that would be one thing. But they didn't do it in good faith. And how do I know that they were actually lying? The Young Turks were actually lying. Rachel Maddow, fake tough guy Lawrence O'Donnell were lying. They weren't getting the story wrong. How do you know that, Jimmy? Well, because on news shows, if it's controversial, especially accusing the president of treason, you would bring on people who could maybe push back against that narrative. They never did that. The guy Aaron Mate right here, who's on our show, is won an award for debunking Russiagate. They still have never had him on their show. Still CNN won't bring him on. Still Brian Stelter won't bring him on. Cuomo won't bring him on. Jake Tapper won't bring him on. Rachel Maddow won't bring him on. Fake tough guy Lawrence O'Donnell won't. Chris Hayes won't bring him on. The nerd even won't bring him on. He's a liar. He's compromised. They're all shitty liars. They're all shitty people. They're all bought and paid for. This isn't a mistake. Because how do I know that? Because I got the story right and I'm fucking baked. So these people are liars of the highest order. And if somebody paid me $30,000 a day, I'd fucking lie about it too. And that's what's happening. And you want to see her lie some more about it? Here we go.
It's one level of bad to realize that Russia is doing this, right? That the U.S. intelligence has concluded that Russia is paying cash money to people for killing U.S. troops. That is very, very bad.
She's saying the intelligence have concluded. You mean the CIA? And what are you supposed to do as a journalist, Rachel? You're supposed to be skeptical of the conclusions of the CIA because they've been caught lying every 5 seconds of my life. And we learned this from the CIA. You don't learn things from the CIA, Rachel. They're not teaching college classes. The CIA are not teaching you anything. Here we go.
But it's a whole nother level of bad to know that the U.S. president has known that Russia was doing that for 4 months. And
it's one level of bad to get a story wrong that red baits your political enemies and McCarthy smears the president. It's a whole another level of bad to never even bring on Aaron Mate or anybody to push back against the CIA's narrative. Who did they bring on? They brought in the guy from the CIA. They didn't bring on me or Matt Taibbi or Chris Hedges or Lee Camp or Aaron Mate or Max Blumenthal. They brought and that's it, by the way, for all the people debunking it. I think I got everybody. That's it. They didn't bring on any of us. Aaron's an award-winning reporter. Chris Hedges is a Pulitzer Prize winner. Glenn Greenwald, the best reporter of our generation. They iced him out at MSNBC and CNN. I wonder why that is. Because they weren't honest actors and they weren't trying to tell you a story. They were manufacturing consent for the establishment and the military-industrial complex. Rachel Maddow is responsible for dead soldiers. She's responsible for dead people in Afghanistan. She's responsible for that. She is responsible for dead people in Afghanistan. That's what you get for doing that.
During that time, he's chosen to do nothing about it. That is a whole other level of crisis. In fact, during the time that the president has had this information, he's had at least a half dozen apparently super chummy phone calls with the Russian president. After those phone calls, he has made a bunch of unilateral offers to Russia of policy stuff that Russia might want for free, with him asking nothing in return. The president during this time has advocated that Russia get back into the G7. When other members of the G7 said no over our dead bodies, he canceled the G7. He also moved to take thousands of U.S. troops out of Germany, which is a longtime Russian priority to get that many U.S. and NATO forces out of Germany. That apparently he didn't even talk to the Pentagon or the State Department about in advance. The president just announced he would be granting that Russian wish in exchange for, again, nothing. And he has done these things. He has had these half dozen conversations with Putin and made those unilateral offers to Russia to give them things they want after he reportedly was briefed. After the White House had started convening high-level meetings to discuss the fact that the Russian president is paying cash, literally cash, dollars, for the murder of Americans in Afghanistan.
She used literally.
Well, figurative cash just isn't worth that much anymore. I mean, it's gone down. Don't you just love how the system works, by the way? It's like, the CIA has looked into the claims made by the CIA and has decided that the CIA is telling the truth. The police has looked into the police and decided the police did nothing wrong. Then you have a media that goes, we see no problems here. That sounds great.
And again, as all this was happening, there were reports coming out saying that there were other intelligence agencies that dissented from the CIA's conclusion, including the NSA, including the Defense Intelligence Agency, and others too. Part of the problem, though, was the New York Times being the first outlet to break this story and really got emotionally attached to it and refused to acknowledge that it was a hoax. They would report the dissenting opinions, but they'd bury them in the bottom of their stories. And the same reporters who initially promoted the bounty hoax were now the ones reporting that all these other intelligence agencies were disagreeing with the CIA. So someone like Charlie Savage, for example, who I once thought of as a really good reporter, he's done great stuff. He got the first Russia bounty story. And if you look at his reporting, you read it, you just see a guy who is getting all this constant information given to him, showing that no one else is buying into it, that other intelligence agencies and the Pentagon are dismissing the story. And instead of being honest about that and grappling with the fact that he bought into the story and got it wrong, what he does is he puts the information at the bottom of his stories and he tries to minimize it. So what he'll do is he'll interview former intelligence officials who will cast doubt on the reliability of the intelligence that is casting doubt on his bounty story. And it's just so disingenuous. And listening to Maddow, it's painful at this point. It was entertaining for a while during Russiagate when every night she was like screaming about the Trump-Russia conspiracy and that Russian bots were taking over our country. It was kind of funny, but at this point, it's painful because the dishonesty and the agenda that they're serving, like these are, as you say, Jimmy, these people are serving an agenda that's getting American troops killed. And they're doing so while feigning concern for U.S. troops.
Yes.
So Lawrence O'Donnell, he did this segment in July where he put up on the screen the images of 3 slain U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan. And he was basically saying that these people were killed because of Russian bounties. These people are using the deaths of U.S. soldiers to advance their own deranged Cold Warrior agenda. And of course, there will be no reckoning for it because they're not journalists. They're disinformation actors in a disinformation campaign against the American public.
And if you want to know why I have lost a lot of my comedy friends in Hollywood is because they all watch Rachel Maddow credulously. Dana Gould, the executive producer of The Simpsons, watches Rachel Maddow credulously. That's why The Simpsons haven't been fucking relevant for 20 years. That's why, because it's run by shit libs who get their news from a disinformation actor, and that's why they have zero impact on the culture anymore. You know who has more impact on the culture than The Simpsons? A pothead fucking YouTube comedian. That's right. Nobody's writing hit pieces on the executive producer of the fucking Simpsons because he's upending the system or he's challenging the establishment. He's there to make sure you don't get health care, and he's made the war machine keeps going, which is why the Simpsons are like what they are. And now you know why they are like that, because that's where those people get their fucking news. All my old friends from Hollywood watch fucking MSNBC, and they sit there and they hate Trump, and then they watch my show and they think that I lost my mind, and so they write me off. Well, it's because they're been propagandized, because they're watching, they haven't read Manufacturing Consent by Noam Chomsky and Ed Herman. Don't forget, was his name? Ed Herman? Was that the other guy? Yeah, I got it.
Wow.
That's right. Everybody leaves out Ed Herman. Don't leave him out. Anyway,
He actually wrote the majority of the book. And by the way, Jimmy, I just got to say, being a shitlib, being an MSNBC fanatic, that's got to hurt your comedy. Your comedy, I have a hard time believing you can still be funny if your main source of information is MSNBC, because you'll turn into like a Cold War maniac liberal who sounds insane. And it just, how are you going to find comedy in that? I don't know. I feel bad for comedy when I think about that.
As Bill Hicks used to say about his comedy, that it happens to be true, which gives it that extra oomph that a good joke needs.
Yeah.
And so all the shitlib comedy has been happening in Hollywood for the last 4 years has been just that, shitlib comedy, because it doesn't have that oomph. What it does is it has the smell of McCarthyism. It has the stench of fucked up backwards artistic endeavors. That's not art when you're repeating the establishment fucking McCarthy smear of all your political enemies. That's why your comedy sucks now, and it doesn't have any oomph. Okay. Here's what Glenn Greenwald said. One of the New York Times reporters who originally broke the Russia bounty story, originally attributed to unnamed intelligence officials, says today that it was a CIA claim. So media outlets, again, repeated CIA stories with no questioning. Congrats to all. That's exactly right. Here's Matt Taibbi. In case anyone needs reminding, here's a partial list of the ex-spooks who served as media figures in the Trump years. So he's telling you these are the people who came right from they're professional paid liars to push war and overthrow other governments and lie to us. And they were brought on news shows as credible actors, as resources for facts, and he gives you all their names. And I won't go through reading them, but it took 2 posts to fit them all in. Biden administration to impose tough sanctions on Russia. They're still doing this, Aaron. Administration officials were determined to draft a response that would impose real costs on Moscow, as many previous rounds of sanctions have been shrugged off. Yeah, because it's made up. And they're still doing it. And let me remind everybody where these stories come from that the New York Times print, and then Rachel Maddow, fake tough guy Lawrence O'Donnell, Chris Hayes, Cenk Uygur, they all repeat breathlessly without skepticism. And here's where their stories come from.
Another thing is to...
By the way, this is an ex-CIA guy. He's telling you how it works. Can you turn it up a little?
Propaganda to influence people's minds. And this is a major function of the CIA. And unfortunately, of course, it overlaps into the gathering of information. You have contact with a journalist, you will give him true stories, you'll get information from him, you'll also give him false stories.
Did you buy his confidence with true stories?
You buy his confidence and set him up. We've seen this happen recently with Jack Anderson, for example, who has his intelligence sources, and he has also admitted that he's been set up by them. Every 5th story just simply being false. You also work on their human vulnerabilities to recruit them in a classic sense, to make them your agent so that you can control what they do, so you don't have to set them up sort of, by putting one over on them. So you can say, here, plant this one next Tuesday.
Can you do this with responsible reporters?
Yes, the Church Committee brought it out in 1975, and then Woodward and Bernstein put an article in Rolling Stone a couple of years later. 400 journalists cooperating with the CIA, including some of the biggest names in the business, to consciously introduce the stories into the press.
Well, give me a concrete example of how you use the press this way, how a false story is planted and how you got it published?
Well, for example, in my war, the Angola war that I helped to manage, 1/3 of my staff was propaganda. Ironically, it's called covert action inside the CIA. Outside, that means the violent part. I had propagandists all over the world, principally in London, Kinshasa, and Zambia. We would take stories which we would write and put them in the Zambia Times, and then pull them out and send them to a journalist on our payroll in Europe. But his cover story, you see, would be that he'd gotten them from his stringer in Lusaka, who had gotten them from the Zambia Times.
So that's how it works. That's how it works. That's how the CIA controls the media, and that's how you get misinformed, and that's how we end up going into Iraq. That's how we end up going into Libya. That's how we end up going into Syria. That's how we end up staying in Afghanistan for 20 years. Because of stuff like that, and because of highly paid disinformation artists like Rachel Maddow. And it'll never say in Wikipedia that she's a conspiracy theorist, but that's what she's. Is there anything she said there that's crazier than what Alex Jones ever said? Nothing she said there was. Everything she said there was just as crazy or crazier than anything Alex Jones has ever said. She's spinning an unbelievable conspiracy theory about the president of the United States being a traitor, and nobody's doing anything about it, by the way. He's just running the country and running our military as he's a traitor with our sworn enemy. Really? That was really happening, and nobody was doing anything about it? The generals in his cabinet weren't doing anything about it, but Rachel Maddow knew she was a traitor. And she was so sure of it, she wouldn't bring on Aaron Matei, Glenn Greenwald, Lee Camp, Jimmy Dore, Matt Taibbi, Chris Hedges, or Secular Talk to debunk it. No, she was so sure of it, she was afraid to have someone come on and give a different point of view. That means that means she knew she was lying, and she's responsible for dead people in Afghanistan. I've never been responsible for something like that. The worst thing you could say about me was that, I don't know, I told the truth about Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden. That's about the worst thing I ever did, I think. And I debunked gas attacks in Afghanistan. I did that. I mean, gas attacks in Syria. I did that. Those are horrible things. That's what people hate me for. Oh, and I also pushed force the vote. I tried to get people health care. I never did anything like Lawrence O'Donnell, Chris Hayes. I never showed Trump's empty podium for an hour as he was running for office. I never did that. Chris Hayes did that. Rachel Maddow did that. Talk about platforming someone. $2 billion in free media. Anyway, I'll throw it back to the expert, Aaron Matei. Aaron, anything you want to...
Well, look, yeah, so just in terms of the consequences of this, we have to make clear, I'm not sure if we've mentioned it yet, but what did all of this freak out about the bounties actually mean? And this is why it led to people being killed in Afghanistan, which is that after this Afghan bounty story came out, pro-war Democrats united with pro-war Republicans. This is something that Glenn Greenwald wrote about and did a video on. And they passed an amendment that would essentially hinder Trump's calls to withdraw U.S. troops from Afghanistan and also Germany. So all this actually helped keep U.S. troops in Afghanistan for longer, because Trump's plan, or so he said it was at least, was to pull U.S. troops out by the end of 2020. And this was used to help undermine that, which also Gareth Porter reported on at the Gray Zone. And I don't know if you still have the slide, Jimmy. You showed it a couple of slides ago, just in terms of how the media works. It's really funny. You showed a story that was called Biden to impose tough sanctions on Russia, okay? So that came out April 14th, and it's announcing these new Biden sanctions on Russia. And look at one of the things that it says the U.S. will sanction Russia for. The sanctions will be among what Biden's aides say are seen and unseen steps in response to alleged Russian hacking, known as solar winds. And listen to this, to the CIA's assessment that Russia offered to pay bounties to militants in Afghanistan to kill American troops. So you get that? Just this week, the New York Times was saying that according to the Biden administration, Biden was going to sanction Russia in response to the CIA's assessment that Russia offered to pay bounties to kill U.S. troops in Afghanistan. And one day later, the Daily Beast reports that the Biden administration is admitting that the bounty story is false and is walking it back. That is how sick our propaganda system is.
And there it is. There's the story. Biden administration to impose tough sanctions on Russia. And the rationale for imposing those tough sanctions are this debunked story about the bounty, that they were putting bounties That is unbelievable. And of course, Rachel Maddow's not going to report that Joe Biden is incorrectly imposing sanctions on Russia. She's never going to say that. She's never going to say that story was wrong. By the way, we reported it wrong. They're not going to take that video down from YouTube. They're not taking any of their, just like the Young Turks don't take it down any of their fucking Russiagating or their smears of Julian Assange or their misreporting of the gas attacks or any of that shit. They leave it up. It's unbelievable. Because there's no account. When you lie on the behalf of the establishment, there's never a price to pay. And that's what the Young Turks and MSNBC and CNN does. They lie at the behest of the establishment. And so there's never a price to pay for that. And even though I could debunk it in real time, high in my garage, the people at the tippy top of journalism at the New York Times, the Washington Post, lied to you. John Hudson didn't get it wrong. He lied to you he said that they confirmed that story. He's a liar at the Washington Post. The Washington Post are liars of the highest order, and they're employed by the richest man in the world. Do you really think they're giving you the news? You really think that John Hudson at the Washington Post is worth a shit? Or Dave Weigel, the guy who did pro-war rallies in college, who is now covering progressives? Do you really think those people are giving you the truth? Do you think they're any better than Donald Trump? I say they're worse because they're pretending to be better than him. Donald Trump doesn't pretend to be anything except a fucking used car salesman. These people pretend to be respectable, and that's why they're more insidious. That's what I think. All right, so there you go. And there's huge consequences to these stories. Dead people, our military. Joe Biden just put $20 billion more into the military budget. He can't excuse $20 billion in student loan debt, but he can without debate, without a town hall, without an interview about it, without an op-ed. They can just add $20 billion to the defense budget because of Cold War with China and Russia. And this is killing people. This is taking money out of our budget for other things. And that's what, but remember, that's what MSNBC is there to do. That's what the Young Turks are there to do. They're there to manufacture consent. Hey, everybody, this is the part where I tell you where all our live shows are, but there aren't any. And then this is why I tell you to join our premium program and get extra content, but nobody's got a fucking job. So just enjoy the video.